Okay, well, welcome all to another in-depth with OpenTEAM. We're OpenTEAM, or Open Technology Ecosystem for Agricultural Management, which is a project of the Wolf's Neck Center for Agriculture and the Environment. And our dynamic and growing community consists of more than 45 organizations and 200 curious and skilled individuals who are active every month in various working groups and collaborathons and OpenTEAM related activities. And our in-depth series today helps us build the knowledge base for the OpenTEAM community in a way that fosters coherence and collaboration. And in each of these sessions, it helps us to collaboratively evaluate new concepts and technologies and ask better questions as a community as we seek to build better tools through sharing our work. We seek to address common barriers rather than promote any specific solution. And in this pre-competitive space that we hold, we bring together public and private partners with the objective of better outcomes to accelerate our innovation and share across our boundaries. So with that, I'm really very pleased to have Kevin Cussen with LightFarm present. This isn't the first time he's presented, but the exciting thing is that we have the opportunity to see updates now to some of these concepts that that have been evolving and emerging through this community. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to you. And
all right, thanks so much, Storm. All right, can everyone see my screen? You get a thumbs up.
Yes.
Good to go? All right, cool. Thank you, everyone. So as Dorn mentioned, my name is Kevin Cussen. I work on LightFarm. I'm the product manager here, and I joined the team a year and a half ago. And it's actually quite interesting. In putting together this presentation, like any good open source practitioner, I was looking back at all my old slide decks and say, okay, what can I pull together so that I don't have to build something new? What can I reuse? And in doing that, I actually found the presentation that I did with OpenTEAM. I think it would have been August of last year. So one of the slides that I'm actually going to present is from last year, and then we can contrast it with what has happened over the last 15 months. So what has not changed is that our goal is to put LightFarm in the hands of 10,000 diversified farmers by 2023. We are building an app that is as useful as possible to farmers, and then as a byproduct is useful to researchers that are hoping to work with farmers. So the strategy in doing that also has not changed. The first is to focus on usability and utility for diversified and sustainable farmers. So we're building the features that are useful for the farmers first and foremost, and then where we can kind of collect useful data from that, we will then distribute it to researchers that are hoping to learn more about the practices that these type of producers are using. So one example of what that looks like is, this is the screen when I joined the team a little over a year and a half ago. We asked 4 questions. What is your farm name? What's the farm address? What units you use? What currency? And this is just a trivial example of a change that we made. In the new app, obviously the producer has to enter the name of the farm, but they can then just click a button that'll grab their current location, or they can enter in an address, a street address or a latitude and longitude, and then we will assume the units and the currency based on those questions, right? So as much as possible, don't make the user kind of guess or enter in additional information. Let the system assume what it is, and as much as it makes sense, present those numbers or those figures to the user and have them vetted. So when we get into the crop management plans, this has been kind of a central tenet of the strategy. Second, help farmers make a living. Agriculture is a tough business regardless. Sustainable agriculture is a tough business, especially. That's changing for the better. And LightFarm is hoping to be part of that change. And then the last piece is connect farmers with the expert knowledge and tools to improve their practice, right? And that's the entirety of the reason that we're here and part of OpenTEAM, is that we don't want to build an app that's the best at everything. We want to build a really approachable app And then we want to integrate with the tools out there that are just doing fantastic works in their particular domain. And I see many of the people on the call are kind of working on apps that describe that, expertise in a particular domain. So this is a slide that I pulled out of my presentation from a year and a half ago that I wanted to start with, right? So at that point in time, we had a simple farm management app. It was able to log farm operations, capture cost per crop, provide high-level financials, and provide basic sustainability insights. It was pretty clunky. It had its fair share of tech debt, and that is certainly still true, although hopefully at this point it's significantly less clunky. And we had a few active users, right? So you can see we had about 36 logins in a week. I think there were maybe 5 to 10 farms that were using it in British Columbia. Jump to today, LightFarm is being used on 6 continents in more than 75 countries. There are 1,200 different farms and about 1,500 users that are accessing and using the app on a regular basis. So the difference between the farms and the users is that we have multi-farm access, right? So for example, we're working with many partners. If you look at Latin America, in southern Brazil, where extension officers will essentially support many different farmers by using LightFarm. And as an extension officer, I can log in to my user account, and then I can access any of a dozen farms in order to log in and then work with the producer on their practice. And then, my personal aesthetic is I like to just talk over pictures. So we had a new release that came out about 2 weeks ago, and I just want to talk through some of the features that are available in the app. And these are all live screenshots. These are pretty graphics, but they're also just from the app. So we now in LightFarm support 375 different crop types. So you can see that on the left. We support any number of varietals. So as a user, I can look through the crops. If I don't find what I'm growing, I can add a new crop type and I can outline some of the information about it. The scientific name, the nutrient qualities of that particular crop, and I can enter it into the system. One of the neat things about that is that since we are working all over the world with a lot of indigenous communities, a lot of communal agriculture, we tend to get some very interesting crops that are being created in the database from these users. So one of the things that we're hoping to do in the near future is to have some sort of an audit process, where we'll have a crop that's being entered by a user in a remote region of Argentina that gets pushed over to a scientist that is working in agriculture at a local university, and they can say, oh, I know what this person's talking about. And they can essentially vet it so that it becomes part of the global data set of crops that are available for users. On the right side of the screen, what you see is the creation of a varietal. So, we'll have a crop type that is apple. You can add your varietal of Gala. And in order to support the organic certification process, we also capture a number of attributes about that varietal, right? So what is the supplier? Is the seed certified organic? Have the seeds been treated? There's a handful of questions that depend on, one, whether you're getting an organic certification, and then two, what geography you're getting it in. And if I'm not getting an organic certification, is this crop organic certified won't show up. Questions about the treatment of the seed won't show up. It's a much kind of scaled back experience for that user because they don't get the value that entering the extra data and getting their organic certification documents provides. So the next piece is below kind of the crop and varietal level is we have this idea of a crop management plan. So this is actually managing the activities for a particular crop during a particular period of time, right? So I may have an orchard of Gala apples. That individual trees may live for 50 years. The entire crop may live for, or the orchard may live for a certain period of time, but there are going to be activities that I need to do, right? For an annual, it's going to be more kind of clear cut. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Eventually, we'll do like a final harvest, and then we may leave it, or we may plow it under or whatnot. So this idea of a plan kind of captures any of the things that need to happen during a particular period of time, right? So you can see here that we've got carrots, and we're growing several different carrots. We've got plan 1, which is active right now. You can see the dates between the first task that needs to happen towards the cultivation of that. In most cases, that's going to be a seeding or a planting. And then the last task, so April to November. We can also see that there's 4 pending tasks that are there as well. For plan 2, that's planned, so you can create a crop management plan for the coming season. If you want to do your planning, here in British Columbia, I might do my planning November, December, with the intent to start the season several months later. And then you also have documentation of past plans. So the bottom there, you have a completed plan where the user provided a rating so that they can go back and they can look at their plans and say, oh yeah, I remember that one. That worked really well. I planted a few days before everyone else. I got my crop to market, and I made a killing that first weekend at the farmer's market. Farmers can also abandon plans if things don't go to plan. Sorry. And they can add and modify the tasks that are taking place. So there in the center, we see kind of a drill down into that plan 1, and we can see that there was a planting task, there was a transplant, and then there was a harvest. And there could be any type of task that's associated with this. If it's a cover crop, instead of a harvest, we might have a terminate. Within these plans, we capture a lot of the information that goes into the specific details that someone will need to do the work, right? So if you can imagine a situation where there's a farm owner or manager, and they've got 50 tasks that need to happen in any given day, and there's 10 workers, it's really valuable to be able to just assign a task to someone. All of the details are captured in that task. And on the right side, you can see what we're talking about there.
Wow.
Right? For that planting task, you would have carrots. You can see seedling and planting stock. You can choose the planting method, and then you can even provide the details for that planting method. And coming back to the previous point, like, as much as we can, we have each of these values built into the data set ahead of time, right? So we're not going to ask the farmer, how far apart do you want to plant these? We're going to recommend you should plant these 3 centimeters apart, and then they can modify it from that point, right? We always give them something to like make a judgment call, rather than saying, how many days is it from seeding to when this emerges, right? Like, they may or may not know that. A little bit more about tasks. So when you create a crop management plan, it's going to, by default, generate a certain number of tasks that comply with that particular crop management plan. And then you have the ability to do other type of tasks. Tasks can exist as part of a crop management plan. So I can go in and add a new task, or they can exist outside of a crop management plan. If I'm just walking along the fence line and I see there's a hole, in the very near future, I'll be able to take a picture of that and then create a task and assign to someone. Otherwise, I could go in there and create a task today, just without the photo, and assign it to someone. In the center there, you see kind of my to-do list. So as a user that's been assigned a task, I have this to-do list. It's going to be ordered by, what's overdue, what's due today, what's coming in the future. And I can go in and say, okay, I finished transplanting the carrots. It took me this amount of time. I enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it this much. And then you can leave notes as well, right? And the notes could be, the mud was like really soggy, took a lot of time, or it could be, I'm starting to see some pests that have moved in. Documents. So a big part of LightFarm's value is that we can, at the end of a season, spit out almost all of the documents that you will need to get your organic certification. So part of supporting that process is you can upload documents or upload pictures into LightFarm for safekeeping, and then that'll come out as part of your certification export. So there's a few use cases here. Like one, if you just want to keep track of your expenses, when you're checking out from the supply store, you could take a photo of your receipt. You could take a photo of, stickers that are on packaging of seeds or fertilizers that you're using that shows their certification status. And you can see that on the right there with the OMRI listed fish compost. So this is pretty straightforward feature. If you've ever used kind of an app that documents expenses, you'll be very familiar with the way this works. And then kind of the big thing that we provide is by documenting what's going on your farm in LightFarm, at the end of a season, you can say, I want to create a reporting period from this date to this date. Show me all of the tasks that are relevant to organic certification that took place during that period. Show me all of the seeds that I had an active crop management plan during that period, and pull all of the attributes that are required for me to get a certification and populate these documents. So right now we've got 2 documents that we populate. One is the seed and planting stock and the organic status of all of those. We also have all of your inputs. So that is soil amendments for crops that you're growing. It's also cleaning agents and disinfectants for surfaces that are organic or non-organic certified, and then any pest control that's being used as well. So we generate those documents based on the activities so that you can just get it at the end of the season. So we're working with a handful of certifiers up here in British Columbia. We're also working with a number of certifiers in Latin America. And if a producer is working with one of those certifying bodies for their organic certification, we're going to spit out the documents in the format that they need. If a farmer is not working with one of the certifying bodies that we're working with, we can still generate kind of generic documents that will help them in their organic certification process, but it's not going to be a copy paste the way that it would be otherwise. Lastly, LightFarm provides sustainability insights into the farm. So this is a research project that some students at University of British Columbia did last year, kind of looking at all of the sustainability frameworks and assessment tools that are out there, and then kind of through the lens of accessibility, saying what are the highest impact indicators that are going to be actionable, that a farmer that may not have access to electricity on a regular basis, or may not have access to tools for testing soil, or just has limited accessibility to many of the tools that are helpful for understanding kind of the holistic nature of a farm. So this is the suggestion. We haven't built in all of these indicators into the app yet, but this gives you an idea of kind of where our focus area is, right? Like we are trying to assess the metrics that are going to be helpful for any farmer in the world, regardless of kind of their access to technology, their access to specialized facilities or tools, so that we can work with any farmer anywhere, right? It's not necessarily going to be really helpful for someone that is running, like variable rate irrigation with soil sensors, but it is going to be helpful for farmers that are doing a diversified farm, growing 80 crops on the side of a volcano in Ecuador. Okay, so LightFarm is part of OpenTEAM. We've been part of OpenTEAM for about 2 years, and there's a lot of ways that we're interested in kind of collaborating and engaging with the community. We have worked with other tools in the ecosystem. Part of our certification process integrates with Survey Stack so that we can kind of split out the quantitative information, and that's pulled directly from records in LightFarm and put it into certification forms. And then the qualitative portion, things like, what's your strategy for preventing groundwater contamination, right? So when a user is creating their certification documents, any of those qualitative questions are going to go over, it's going to ask SurveyStack, for this certifier, do you have any additional questions? And if that certifier has added questions to SurveyStack, the farmer in LightFarm is then going to get these questions that they can go through and answer. And then it's going to combine those documents and push it out to the farmer. So that's one example of a way we've engaged with other parties in OpenTEAM. But we're also interested in building out common infrastructure, integrations, especially around the idea of helping our users get paid and make their sustainable farm more profitable and more sustainable, connecting them with the latest science, especially around greenhouse gas emissions and payment for environmental services. We're interested in helping researchers that are interested in using our data sets to learn more about sustainable practices. We would welcome both software and scientific contributions. It's an open source project, and we have a handful. It isn't our primary focus yet, but we have a handful of open source contributors that have come in and made contributions. Brainstorming, collaboration, information sharing. We would welcome contributions to our roadmap. Governance is especially large around the usage of data that farmers are generating on our platform. Right now, it's probably the most pro-producer privacy policy that I've ever seen. Essentially, farmers own their data. They can ask for it to be destroyed, removed. They can ask for it to be exported. And the only way that we use data in aggregate in an anonymized form is to support research in sustainable agriculture. But that's going to continue to evolve as we gain additional traction. And then co-authoring joint proposals for funding. So to close up, my name is Kevin Cussen. I'm the product manager, so I essentially build out the software. My colleague, Hannah Whitman, is the researcher and the co-founder of LightFarm. And she's more the contact person for any researchers interested in using LightFarm for their projects, or researchers interested in using data from LightFarm. And with that, I am done. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Kevin. So if folks want to take a moment, you can either put your questions in the chat, or we're a small enough group that feel free to jump in, or indicate your intention to speak.
And I see there's two chats. I can answer them real quick before we take any others. Sure, Derek, my email is on there. Shoot me an email and I'm happy to share the slide deck. And then Michael, we do not do food safety certifications at present. I've had a few conversations with folks that do food safety inspections, and it seems like a direction we could take it. But if that's something you're looking for, I'd love to chat with you as well.
And actually, I can comment on that. I know that the state of Vermont has actually worked with PharmaOS to support the Food Safety Modernization Act. So there is a module there. So if you're interested, if that's an important consideration, might want to follow up with the PharmaOS team on that side.
Okay, I'll jump in then and just comment. The reason I asked is I ran a farm for a while, and having anything that incorporates data and procedural logging and all that, the less you have to switch to a different app, the better. And food safety certifications, at least here in the US, are always a consideration. It's always a really important thing that you have to do, and they're all proceduralized. So I think LightFarm, PharmaOS, both are just very, that kind of platform is very well positioned to be able to take that on with minimal effort. So that's all.
Great.
Thanks.
Kevin, Tom Watson had a question about annuals and whether you're also supporting perennials. And I actually might have a follow-up, or I do have a follow-up on the plant data curation.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we support both. We're actually working with a pretty supportive and expansive agroforestry group in southern Brazil. So a lot of the way that we built crop management plans is to support this idea of what's the best way to put this? To support the idea of intermingled crops, right? So you can plant something that's going to be 30 feet tall in a particular location on your farm, and then you can also mix it in with a bush and then ground cover, and you can grow that all in the same area and kind of indicate that it's going to be in this space. And we're intending to build out the functionality of like the complications and the interchanges between those crops, right? So how are they impacting the soil? How are they impacting the shade that's available at different layers? So yes, we absolutely do support annuals and perennials, and we're hoping to build that out further to get deeper into agroforestry as well.
So I wanted to follow up on that too, because the process that you laid out in terms of that data curation intersects a lot with some of the work that Ankita Raturi has been doing with the cover crop decision tool, and conversation that we've been having actually with USDA on their plants database, and how we might move towards a system that's more dynamic, that allows for that same sort of review process that you described, by sort of having groups that have curate particular groups of plants in various regions, and how we can set up that sort of that governance structure to create sort of a continual improvement with the appropriate checks. So I was just really curious about that, because again, it's as much as we've had, that is an aspect that actually I don't think we've really discussed much on previous calls with LightFarm, and I was really curious about sort of where you are in that process and what level of interface development you've thought through in terms of supporting that, within the app, or whether that's, you imagine that as existing more on the admin side.
Are you talking specifically around the ability of farmers to create their own crop types and their own
crop
varietals?
Types, and then crop types, and then I guess the other piece is that they're varietals, and then I guess then the part that in other aspects of OpenTEAM and Plants database is really also being able to add additional attributes to those varietals or comments, and as we are looking at, because it's not just the varietal, but it's the seeding rate, it's the maturity window. Like, there's a lot of attributes that go along with those phenotypes which I think is an incredibly powerful sort of process that we could unlock here. So I'd love to hear more your thinking on that area of the app. Even it's quite different from the certification piece, but it's I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So I can speak to that. So the short answer is that the way we built out the architecture enables this process. So today, in a totally ad hoc way, we can look at the database, we can tell which of the crop types and the varietals are user created, and we can look at where that farm is, and we can send it to a researcher we're working with to say like, hey, can you add any additional information? So at this point, it's a totally ad hoc process, but the process to make it part of the app would be adding UI, right? Like the database, the structures, the backend, it all exists for this to be built out. We just need to have essentially a scientific audit kind of login to be able to do that. You had mentioned the cover crops database and tool that Ankita built, and absolutely, I think that's a fantastic tool. I love the UI. I love how simple it is. You may actually notice that we are using it's ubiquitous at this point, but like the 5-star rating. And a lot of the inspiration that we have in kind of the very simple UI we built out came from how great they did on the UI for that. So when it comes to the review process, it's totally ad hoc. We're not doing it in any controlled way right now. It just happens that many of the producers that are adopting LightFarm are in some way connected to a university, and the university, the extensions and the professors that are working with them are quite involved in this process. Does that answer your question around the review process?
Yeah, no, that's great. And so I'd love to follow up again on terms of how, you know, your curated database and could interact with some of these other sort of plant data services that are being developed, and what we're trying to sort of coordinate on the USDA side.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
And I think you had an additional question that was essentially the attributes. So right now, farmers cannot add additional attributes to a crop, right? There's no pathway for them to do that in kind of an unstructured way. It's a relational database for the most part. So we would need to add a new column to the table that represents something. That said, for the crops database, we have dozens of attributes. And for each of the crop types that we support, we will have those attributes that are part of the data set, right? So a trivial example would be, is this plant an annual or perennial, right? And I know that there's some gray area in between, but for simplicity, we call it an annual or perennial. Is this a cover crop, true, false? How many days from seeding to emergence? How many days from seeding to first harvest? We have these attributes for each of the crop types in our data set, the 300, let me jump back. The 375 different crop types. So when a user creates a new crop type, kind of the simplistic thing that we do to get those attributes is we average it for the group that they're in. You know, is it a fruit tree? Is it a nut? Is it a grain? And that's kind of the basis, and then the user can modify it from there. If it's a varietal, it essentially just inherits all of those attributes from the crop type. And at present, we don't have a UI for the user to update that. But when they're creating a crop management plan, it's going to pre-populate those values, and the user can at that point overwrite them. You know, if there's they clone a type of tomato, and this is an early grow varietal, they can then say, no, I'm growing this. So rather than it being 2.5 months to harvest, it's actually going to be 2 months, something like that. So does that answer your question, Doran?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, great to get your current thinking and where you're at on that. So Tom had a follow-up. Tom, do you want to ask that?
Oh yeah, sorry. Sure. I just was curious whether you do any networking between the different farms within your who are using the app, or does I get the impression the service largely focuses on what happens internally on the farm, so it's more to help a farm internally organize.
Yeah, great question. We don't really. So one of our indicators is a price for a crop type. And the way that works is it will give the farmer kind of the price that they've gotten for a particular crop over time. And then it will give them a network price. And the network price is essentially an average of all of the farms in their area that are also selling that crop type. But there's no way that, say, Farmer Jim could send a message to Farmer Jane and they could coordinate. That said, you know, this is another one of those places where we're part of an open source community. We're watching the, oh gosh, I'm blanking on it, the coffee shop project intently, because that would be something great that we would love to be able to just like plug in and integrate with. Does that answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, thanks. Yes, it does. Yeah, we're also, so I don't know if you've seen the Hilo work or discussions that are going on, and we're working alongside Greg and the folks who are building up the coffee shop to also, because we're a social coordination platform, And so we're kind of looking to operate at the sort of farm to farm level as well. So just curious to sort of see the different layers in which we can collaborate. So it's just cool to see this, and I would hope one day that we could also provide something useful for folks on your application if they want to sort of interconnect.
Yeah, certainly that is of great interest to us. One thing that I will say about our farm distribution is that it is, so you can see from this map that we have certain hubs, right? So British Columbia is where we started. We have a big presence here. We generate the documents that farmers need here for their certification, right? So it makes a lot of sense. And then some of those other large circles you can see are places where we have partnerships with farmer organizations. So Southern Brazil, and then in Bahia, in Brazil, Ecuador, El Salvador, Mexico, and then Argentina. We have partnerships there where co-ops are working and supporting farmers in using LightFarm. Everywhere else in the world is just organic growth. And I mean organic in the product development term here. Yeah, it's we have done zero marketing. We've spent $0 pushing LightFarm to users outside of those countries. So everything else is just word of mouth. So when I look at my analytics for logins and new users, it's largely direct searches. And we have a few websites that have recommended LightFarm as a tool for farmers. The FAO has said that. I think Young Agrarians has done a spotlight on LightFarm. But by and large, farms just kind of find it and adopt. So I think we're a ways away from having a place where we have like a tight enough geographical cluster outside of maybe British Columbia and a handful of other places where social is going to be like our like social networking is going to be a big push. I mean, that said, I could be wrong. I could be reading the situation completely wrong. And I'd love to learn more about high-low.
Thanks, Matt.
Well, I thought Doran was going to say something.
Well, I was that
non-politic.
There's a little hiccup on the recording there.
Okay.
But, we're all good. No, I was curious actually on the on sort of the farm accounting side. Maybe say a little bit more about that. I mean, I know particularly there's a great deal of interest in the process of being able to share cost of production and so forth. And we've certainly talked about the ag qualit and some of the sort of consent management systems to allow for the kind of data sharing on some of that information. So it's really useful, for your own tracking. But I think one of the exciting possibilities, not only for research but for producers, is to be able to share some of that information to sort of benchmark, which again is part of the coffee shop concept. But I think so I guess I would love to hear your approach to sort of that farm accounting piece. So yeah.
Yeah, so when you say accounting, you're talking about kind of regarding practices, not actually the financials and the profitability.
Not like QuickBooks. It's not about sharing QuickBooks with each other. It's more about like what's cost of production and pricing and things like that.
So what I can say is kind of the initial feature that we implemented was cost of production and profitability crop by crop and at a whole farm level, right? And we tried to tie this together with other non-financial indicators to help kind of farmers understand where they are in a holistic sense, right? And Hannah Whitman, a lot of her research is around kind of making apples to apples comparison of agroecological producers against more traditional producers, because there's this idea that agroecological producers are less efficient, right? They spend more time getting less yield. And a lot of her research is trying to show that that's not necessarily the case, and that agroecological farms tend to have higher biodiversity. They're just as productive. It's just a smaller scale because a lot of the produce is not sold, right? It's consumed by the family. It's used as compost. It's used to feed animals, various other things. So kind of the initial reason for LightFarm was to help make this argument with data. So that is certainly something we're trying to do with the insights. It's something that we try to capture with our finances. And I was looking through the appendix here, and unfortunately, I don't have any images from our finances, but it's one of the more stable parts of the app, right? So essentially, you can get your whole farm profitability, you can get crop by crop profitability. We're going to be adding additional kind of granularity around like type of task. How much time do you spend doing this? Person doing the task. How much time does Joe spend doing this? How much does it cost to do each of these activities to help farmers make a better kind of assessment of things that are going on their farm? I don't know if I did a good job answering your question there, Dorn.
No, that's great.
Okay.
I guess this is a little bit out there. We were supposed to have a presentation earlier this fall on natural language interface. That ended up having to get rescheduled, but I'd love to hear if that's been also something that you've had any work done at UBC on, or other intersections. I'm hoping to bring some of that conversation into OpenTEAM in the next year. So just love to hear your thoughts on that too.
So natural language interface, does that mean just like using...
Speaking, yes. Speaking for data entry, right, yes.
No, it's a recommendation we've heard, for sure. It's nothing that we've done work on yet.
Great. So, and I guess the other thing that there's, Jeff has a question.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to challenge and maybe get both you and Tom to comment a little bit on the relative value of sharing knowledge and information locally as opposed to globally. So you made the statement that there may not be that value because you don't have a concentrated sets of farmers except in a couple of parts of the world. And I guess I'd just like to throw out a challenge and see what you and Tom think, that, if we want to accelerate innovation, the best way to accelerate innovation is to get people to build on each other's innovation. And if we acknowledge that there are farmers all over the world working on very similar soils and climates with very similar access to inputs and mechanization. So for example, Mount Kenya in Kenya, obviously, and a lot of the highlands in Latin America are remarkably similar, and they're the same, and they're all innovative, and so the question then is there a way to build this sort of social networking in a way that doesn't, you've got to filter, right? But if there's clearly an innovation that has come out of someplace and we could rapidly share it someplace else, then we start to accelerate, or I guess my hypothesis is that we can accelerate innovation globally. Is that possible? Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Tom, I think you probably know this area a bit better. Do you want to jump in and then I can follow up?
I can jump in with some of our thoughts. So I'm a geospatial person by background, and to badly paraphrase it, there is like some general geographic law that the closer two things are, the more similar they are. So that's always going to apply. There's always going to be an element of like very useful information locally, but as you say, there are these pockets across the world that while they are not linked in terms of sheer distance. They do have similar biomes or similar climatic and soil situations, and our I think one of the things that we've been considering that's come out of this discussion between the Hilo folk and the OpenTEAM collaboration, and this is something that I think applies for all of the different groups that we're catering for on our platform, because regenerative culture is a broader spectrum than regenerative agriculture, for example, is the idea of like relevancy, and can we learn to figure out some form of algorithm to generate a relevancy score between all of the different entities on our platform. So in particular, we're thinking about that for the farming push, the push to get farms on the platform. And so these factors and the discussions we're having about soil type and how to represent that, climatic factors, and whether people are growing similar-ish things. All of those things are data points that we want to distill at a farm level into some sort of aggregate score that can help us make these leaps potentially across continents. And then, of course, there's always the challenge of language, bridging that gap as well. But I do that's the sort of like the longer term vision I'm hoping we can get to. The immediate, the cheapest algorithm for like determining something that is relevant that we can use is just sheer proximity. Like, these are farms in your area, and so we can assume that they're doing similar-ish things if they're on this platform. But we definitely want to make those links across the distance, across these big gaps, over the pond, as I would say, as an Australian. Well, in California, I should just clarify.
I think this highlights the time. We've got some big releases that are coming out of the RSI team around the coffee shop and visualize the user interface there. So that's going to be, I think, fun to sort of circle back around in the coming in-depths to make some of those connections. Because, like you say, Kevin, I think it'd be great to sort of plug in directly to some of those other capabilities here. I see Steve Francis has his hand up, so I'd love to give him a shot here.
Sure. I just, in the last few minutes, Kevin, we had talked previously about your approach to localization as you kind of started that project. Is there anything you can share with the broader sort of tech teams on how that worked out and what worked and didn't work for you as you approach localization?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that much has changed since our conversation, other than we've done what we were talking about at that point in time. So at this point, the app is available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and it'll be available in French in the next month. And the approach that we took was fairly naive. Essentially, when we're building out the app and we're building new screens, we have a language tag that kind of describes the idea of what's going to happen. And then it looks up against a library for that particular tag. And the library is just, a set of those terms in each of the different languages. And whenever we do a new release, we have folks that are our partners in Brazil or Argentina or in Quebec that go through and essentially log into GitHub and overwrite all of the English portions into their local language. They can log into the app and get more context from the screens if they need to. And that's kind of the approach we've taken. So essentially with each new release, it's maybe 15 to 20 hours of translation work for someone that's familiar, that's bilingual. And that's how we approached it. I wouldn't say that it's the best approach, but it was the approach that we took, and it's worked pretty well so far.
Very good. Well, thanks for sharing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say one thing that we do like is that it all happens on GitHub, right? So someone logs in, we'll do a 20-minute training on how to make a commit, how to do a pull request, and other than that, they're just kind of going down a list. They make a pull request directly against, and then one of our engineers will merge it in, just verifying there aren't like quotation marks missing somewhere. So it's very easy to do. And we've got a page up on our Confluence site describing for non-technical users how to approach it.
And do you tend to get the same people helping release after release, or are you kind of constantly recruiting new people?
No, so far it's been folks that are one of our partners. Okay. So in Brazil, we're working with an organization called Sapagro. And there's one of the people that helps with the extension and kind of the communications jumps on. We've got a student from McGill in Montreal right now that's doing the French translations, that she's interning with the project this term. And then we have some Spanish speakers on the team that will do those. So it's typically the same person. We haven't had any outside contributors come in and offer to translate the app into Romanian, for example, but we're hoping that at some point that will happen.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jeff, let me send that to you after the call.
Great. Just for others who are listening, didn't see the text, Jeff Herrick was asking about translation instructions on Confluence. And Jeff, you were mentioning that you're using a similar approach, but not formalized it for land PKS. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I mean, it's worked really well, but the challenge we've found is that even though it's fairly simple and straightforward to do, it does take someone with a pretty high attention to detail to not mess up those quotes. and in fact, even some of our former coordinator who is master's level and has worked in this area and so forth, and just wasn't able to do it, whereas the guy that's been doing our Spanish translation is tremendous, and he was an undergrad in engineering. That may be helpful, I'm not sure. And we're continuing to actually pay him in this case, now that he's gone on to, and he's got an engineering job, but he does it in the evenings for us. But we've had, I think, maybe a total of 4 people try it, and or 5, and 2 of the 5 have worked out. So I don't know. That's why I'm interested in your instructions, because that'll be helpful.
Yeah, I'm happy to show you. We do 1 30-minute session where it's like a show one, follow one type of thing, where someone will go through and make a translation, and then we'll flip the screen share, and the person doing the translations will try one out. And the fact that engineers are reviewing the PR puts a pair of eyes if there are any missing, commas or quotations in the JSON. And then if they miss it, it's not going to build, right? Like, it's going to fail the tests. So that's kind of there's a few layers of checking on. And I did want to loop back, Jeff, to your previous question about how useful information is when it's not like geographically clustered, if you don't mind. I think Tom did a great answer, and he's going to know a lot more. My intuition was, the closer it is, the more useful. And I think especially when it comes to like prices and, availability of inputs and seed and things like that, that's going to be more relevant locally. But you're absolutely right. Like, there are certain technologies that are going to work really well in particular areas. I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Southern Africa, and I'm implementing things in my community that people innovated in Chile, right? Because it's desert, it's dry, it's windy, and I'm able to pull from them because it's a similar climate. And to Tom's point, like the secret sauce is that algorithm. Like, how do you match the things that are important? And that's a big part of my takeaway from Greg's presentation a few days ago, was like, how do you present the relevant, attributes and either matchmake autonomously or put it in front of a farmer to say, like, these are the things that I care about. Now give me suggestions. And that's where it gets tricky.
Well, this is
I want to make a shout out and introduction. Shout out introduction to John Maynard, who's joined the call. John's been on our team. John, your camera's available, maybe turn it on. Is the soil science to develop the soil identification algorithm. And we've had him focusing on actually getting the work done. So he hasn't engaged in a lot of these conversations, but he's actually been thinking a huge amount about how to develop more Bayesian approaches to determining what matters where. So whereas an arid or dryland climate where you're irrigating, you may be most interested in matching based on plant available water holder capacity. Whereas in a steep land area, you're really concerned about slope and soil conservation. In an area that's where you've got highly variable acidity, it may be sort of mitigating for that using organic and non-organic approaches and so forth. And so I think that for both Tom and Kevin, yes, sometimes the most relevant is the adjacent, but there are massive discontinuities, and it may actually be that in some cases, the most relevant, at least from a biophysical perspective, I think much less so from socioeconomic and especially economic perspective, may actually be a continent away. And so, and that's where I think John's, as he continues to kind of noodle through this, and Tom, he will be joining us on our call next week.
Sounds like another great in-depth. I have to, unfortunately, this is an amazing conversation, and we had several other questions lined up, but we're at the top of the hour. So I want to really thank everybody for joining us today, and hope that, again, this is meant to spark exactly these kinds of conversations and follow-ups, and look forward to following up with all of you on our next in-depth. I'll note quickly that our official quote-unquote in-depth sessions will actually take a pause as we survey back through a webinar series that will take a lot of the same content, but pull it together in terms of describing it in terms of within the OpenTEAM ecosystem throughout January. So and then we'll start up the more exploratory in-depths again on the other side of that. So we hope that you'll join us for those webinar series, and we will definitely be diving into a lot of this, the tools that were mentioned today, and then putting them into context with all of you. And I loved, Kevin, that we were able to dwell on, see that map of growth of users for a good portion of this conversation. It really sort of highlights the potential here, and the being able to bridge these communities and build on one another's efforts. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone.